Many members of the base were awakened by the alarm and hurriedly got out of bed to get ready. After getting dressed, they hurriedly went out and asked, "What happened? This kind of alarm hasn't sounded for at least a few years. Did terrorists attack our base?" A group of people asked until someone went to the base hall and returned. They finally got the answer. Something happened in Cambodia. A group of local Cambodian drug dealers led by Akib and Dali captured the important members of 11 Base and their wives and children. They threatened the innocent women and children, contacted the leaders of 11 Base, and set up a heavy ambush in Cambodia. They wanted them to take Mr. NTRO, the think tank behind 11 Base, Mo Jingshan, as an exchange. If Mo Jingshan didn't show up in 3 days, they would throw those innocent women and children into the minefield and blow them to pieces. The Mo family had been in business for generations, and their family was also involved in politics. The Mo family's elder remembered that his ancestors had suffered greatly when they fought with the underworld. He had also learned from Mo Jingshan that he was involved in the underground arms trade and had forced him to swear that he would never be involved in the underworld or stain his hands with blood. Indeed, Mo Jingshan did not need to be stained with blood. He already had a pair of hands that could turn the clouds and rain with a flip of the hand. To avoid suspicion, Ntro was the alias Mo Jingshan used when he was in the underground arms trade. Those people in the underworld knew his real name but were used to calling him Mr. Ntro. The huge forces behind Akib and Dali had long since been disintegrated. They were the branch that had escaped, a very ambitious branch. The few people who had escaped were the backbone of that group, so even if they were just a branch of a team, they had to be dealt with carefully. And now they directly kidnapped many innocent women and children, who were the families of many old members of 11 Base who had left 11 Base because of the old age. This matter attracted the absolute attention of 11 Base, and Li Nanheng couldn't go to T-City now because of this matter. He had to go to Cambodia immediately. The news that something happened in Cambodia was directly passed to Fong Ling's ears the next day. Because the people Li Nanheng left with her were all from 11 Base, they would soon know what had happened. And because they knew Fong Ling's existence and status in 11 Base, they didn't hide anything from her. At this time, if Li Nanheng abandoned the things in the base and flew back to T-City immediately, Fong Ling would really be angry. What she was most concerned about now was Jin Wan. Mr. Mo seemed to have left early this morning. He probably wouldn't tell Jin Wan the reason. She didn't know how the situation in Cambodia would develop, but she had been in contact with people like Akib and Dali. Chapter 1151. Fong Ling thought that since she had experienced so many dangers in 11 Base, she should be able to stabilize Jin Wan's mood. But what she didn't expect was that Jin Wan was pregnant at this time. Fong Ling wanted to go to Cambodia to help because she learned that several of Dali's snipers were good at shooting. After all, she used to be a member of 11 Base's sniper team. She called Kay and Kay said she could go there, so she told him everything about Jin Wan. She was very anxious about Jin Wan's pregnancy and wanted Mr. Mo to come back safely as soon as possible. It didn't feel good to wait here all the time. She had the ability, so she just wanted to go to Cambodia to fight. However, what she didn't expect was that Jin Wan, a woman who had just become pregnant and who vomited every day when she felt uncomfortable, had the ability to avoid their sight and sneak onto the same plane as them for her husband. The plane landed in Cambodia, and Fong Ling was about to get off the plane when she saw Jin Wan. How could this be? Jin Wan was a pregnant woman. How could she appear in such a place? Fong Ling was very angry and annoyed that she failed to keep an eye on her, so she forced Jin Wan to take her away and help her book a flight back to High City. She could understand Jin Wan's mood. Jin Wan asked her if it were her, could she stay in High City at ease? The answer was, of course no. No one could keep waiting like this with a clear conscience. She tried to persuade Jin Wan again and again, even though she knew that her words were useless. Jin Wan said, "But Mo Jingshan is here." Her voice was not high, but every word she said was firm. Just when Jin Wan was about to agree to leave Cambodia because of Fong Ling's pretense of indifference, suddenly, a cold voice came from not far away. "What's the matter?" The two of them turned around and saw Li Nanheng approaching. Why was he at the Cambodian airport? Shouldn't he be at the camp on the other side of Tunnel Sap Lake? However, just a few days ago, Fong Ling had just been bullied by this man. Her expression froze for a moment, especially when she saw the coldness in his eyes. She thought he was blaming her for her incompetence because Jin Wan appeared here, so she subconsciously explained, "Sorry, I didn't expect Mrs. Mo to get on the plane with us. I'll send her back to High City as soon as possible." Of course, Li Nanheng's coldness was not because of Jin Wan's appearance here. Everyone could see the love between Jin Wan and Mo Jingshan. If she could calmly stay in High City and enjoy the fruits of others fighting to save her husband, she would not be the woman Mo Jingshan would care about. Even if she came, it wouldn't be a problem, so it wasn't a big deal. He hadn't forgotten that Feng Ling had asked Jin Wan to buy contraceptive pills for her. These days he had to rush to Cambodia. He hadn't had time to settle the score with her, but now she had flown over and bumped into him. Li Nanhing's gaze shifted coldly from Feng Ling's face to Jin Wan. "What are you doing here?" "Mo Jingshan is here." Jin Wan's eyes were calm. He watched her for a while and then glanced at Feng Ling. She didn't know if he was being sarcastic or unintentional. "It wasn't easy to get on the plane under your nose." Feng Ling, if it were before, when she was mocked by him like this in the base, she would at most admit that it was her dereliction of duty. But now facing this man, she just put on a cold expression and couldn't even smile. "It seems that in terms of bravery Jin Wan is definitely not as good as you, but in terms of wisdom I think Jin Wan may be slightly better than you." "Jin Wan?" Feng Ling. She scolded him for being stupid, the other brothers who followed her. "Boss, what's wrong with you? How can you still be in the mood to mock Feng Ling at this time? Don't you see that Mrs. Mo's face is even more bitter than Huang Lian?" Feng Ling put on a cold face and didn't want to talk to him. "I'll have Kay send Mrs. Mo back." "She's already here. How can we send her back? She landed in High City today and will find a way to fly back tomorrow morning. At that time, I'm afraid Mo Jingshan will not be the only one missing," Li Nanhing said coldly. Li Nanhing said coldly, "She is trying to avoid our sight and stay in Cambodia, or standing in front of us safely. Which one is more worrisome?" Feng Ling frowned. "But it's too dangerous here. Before she flew here, she knew better than you that she would face many unknown dangers. She is not a child. She can accept and bear the choices she made. What are you worried about?" Li Nanhing said and looked at Jin Wan lightly. "We don't have much time. Go back to High City or stay here. I'll give you one last choice." "I'll stay." Jin Wan didn't hesitate. Feng Ling frowned. "But Mrs. Mo, you are pregnant." Hearing the word pregnant, Li Nanhing suddenly glanced at Jin Wan and then at her belly. After a moment Li Nanhing asked, "Jin Wan, are you afraid of death?" "No." Seeing the determination in Jin Wan's eyes, Li Nanhing narrowed his eyes and wanted to say, "You are pregnant. How dare you buy contraceptive pills for my wife?" Of course he just scolded her in his heart. Li Nanhing looked at her coldly, lit a cigarette, put it in the corner, narrowed his eyes and turned his head. "Follow me." Then Jin Wan was taken to their camp near Tunnel Sap Lake in Cambodia. After arriving at the camp, Li Nanhing asked Feng Ling to send her to a small room in the camp to rest on behalf of Mrs. Mo, and Feng Ling took her in. Jin Wan was in a good mood. Although she didn't know Mo Jingshan's identity, she was very receptive. Now that she was taken in here, she felt closer to Mo Jingshan, so she didn't show any emotion on her face. Seeing that Jin Wan was very rational and had probably thought through a lot of things before coming here, Feng Ling didn't say anything more. Nan Hung glanced at the dagger that had been accurately inserted into the ground by his feet and chuckled. He bent down to pick up the dagger and walked over. Because no one knew what had happened to Jin Wan, Feng Ling was in a particularly bad mood these 2 days. She was so angry that no one dared to provoke her. After all, Mr. Mo was missing, and they could calmly consider a careful rescue plan. They believed that with Mr. Mo's wisdom and ability he would be fine, but they really couldn't guarantee Jin Wan's safety. Even if she could save her life, she was carrying a child in her belly. Even if both of them were rescued in the end, if Jin Wan's child couldn't be saved in this turbulence, everyone would definitely feel guilty. Especially Feng Ling. After all, she was responsible for protecting Jin Wan, but this time not only did she not stay in High City to protect Jin Wan, but she also took Jin Wan to Cambodia. Now Jin Wan's life was hanging in the balance. Now anyone who mentioned Jin Wan's name in front of Feng Ling could see the obvious worry on her face. Even if she didn't mention Jin Wan's name, she was even less talkative now. She often didn't even eat but just sat in front of the temporary public computer in the camp and kept checking the new minefield map around. It was not difficult to see that she was seizing every opportunity to go in to find Jin Wan. She was so anxious that she couldn't stay calm. Besides, Li Nanheng had just offended her, so it was impossible for her to listen to him. Seeing Feng Ling sitting in front of the computer again, Li Nanheng glanced at the twinkling stars in the sky and then glanced at Kay, who had just returned from the patrol area with a sniper rifle in his arms and was about to have dinner. When Kay passed by him, he said, Kay, I have a task for you. Suddenly hearing Boss Li's cold voice, Kay suddenly stopped and turned to look at Li Nanheng. Ah. Find a way to get Feng Ling drunk. Another word full of doubt, but this time he was obviously more confused than when Boss Li suddenly spoke to him. Don't get too drunk. Let her forget about Jinwan for a while. Don't be so nervous. The rescue team will arrive before noon tomorrow. Before that, no one is allowed to act rashly. Obviously, she won't listen to orders rationally, and she hasn't slept for 2 days. In her current condition, she won't be able to concentrate on the battle tomorrow and will make mistakes. Li Nanheng said lightly, glancing over Kay's shoulder as if inadvertently glancing at Feng Ling, who was concentrating on checking the map of the minefield. The rescue team will arrive before noon tomorrow. Before that, no one is allowed to act rashly. Kay, boss, your words are too dignified. You want Feng Ling to go to sleep now, but you don't dare to coax her, so just say it. You want to get her drunk? But then again, Feng Ling had been very nervous since Jinwan was taken away.